Eamon Khan here for Seconds Out with Frank Smith. Next to Frank Warren joined the press conference and the conversations as they head towards Wardley versus Hooney. Why is Hooney ready to spring the win, maybe even upset in some people's eyes, according to some bookies, against Fabio Wardley?
I think it's a tremendous fight. I think it's a real fight that they both deserve respect for taking, especially at this late notice. I think Justice Hooney is the better fighter, but Fabio has shown that he has got the grit and determination and can work his way through tough times in fights. And sometimes in heavyweight boxing, that has huge value more than anything else. You know, but I think Justice Hooney is going to go in there. I think he's going to deliver a great performance and a big win and set himself up for a massive, massive night for the World Championship in the near future.
WBA interim heavyweight title is on the line. What position in that queue of heavyweights would that put him in for a world title shot for the winner of Usyk versus Dubois 2, should he win it, Hooney?
Up there, you know, look, there's obviously a lot going with all of the governing bodies holding, you know, obviously you've got Joseph Parker's in a position to challenge for the world title as well. You know, so we'll have to wait and see. Derek Chisora, I think, is the IBF number one as well. His last fight was for the final eliminator for that position. So, yeah, look, it's going to be busy, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens post-July 19th with those belts, you know, whoever wins, because it's going to come to the point where they're probably going to start breaking up.
If we rewind a few years back, we would have been talking about the possibility of a Matchroom Queensberry Matchroom fights being made, something that would be an alien concept to promoters, to fight fans and fighters in between, everyone in between of that. This fight is outside of Riyadh, where a lot of the fights have been made. Is that testament to the relationship and the door being open to make fights between the two promotions?
100%. Look, we're always going to be rivals as businesses, but at the same time, it doesn't take away from having a good relationship and getting on and delivering fights. Our job is to both collectively build the sport as big as it can be, because that benefits both of our businesses independently. So we want to do the best and biggest fights in the sport. But let's see how Saturday night goes. But it's good to see big fights happening, you know, between the two of us, you know, and long may it continue.
Fabio was one of the few fighters who's been able to maintain the relationship with Matchroom, having switched over to Queensberry. Is that because of Fabio? Is that because of you guys and how you've dealt? What is the reason he's been able to maintain a relationship with you guys?
No, look, because everything he's done has been in the right manner. You know, his contract came to an end and he left. And he had other opportunities elsewhere. You know, the only time we've fallen out with fighters is where things haven't been done in the right manner. You know, when you work very hard for someone and you feel like you deliver and then someone tries to do things in the wrong way, you know, that leaves a different taste in your mouth. I think with Fabio Wardley, everything he's done, he didn't leave us for Queensberry. I think his fight before that was with Boxer, and then he went and then signed with Queensberry. So, you know, the relationship's always been good with Fabio and will continue to be good, you know, because he's an honourable person and, you know, he's sort of followed the terms of everything he said he'd do, and you can't ask for more than that.
One of the huge drawbacks from reasons to sign up to DAZN will be that football, at least in the UK, mainstream football hasn't been on that platform. But now with the acquisition of the Club World Cup, do you feel that impact of the Club World Cup and football will draw more fans to DAZN?
Yeah, look, it's a huge moment for DAZN. Obviously, the FIFA Club World Cup available globally on DAZN, you know, and it just shows where the platform's at. You know, we made a move very early because we believed in the future and we believed in the way people were going to digest, you know, content would change, and it has. And I think the FIFA Club World Cup's huge for DAZN, and there's many more things on the horizons, I'm sure, that they're working through. So, you know, we're in a great place. I think for the fighters, the opportunities, great. It's the global home of boxing. Nothing comes close to it.
Switching to a Matchroom specific interest, I wanted to ask you about an update on Conor Benn. Rematch with Eubank Jr., is that the one that's penciled in and to be inked?
Yeah, look, the first fights, they were both signed either way as a 2-fight deal. So that's the fight that's planned next. I don't see anything different. All we're waiting for is the football fixtures on June 18th, and then we can get the Tottenham Stadium locked in.
If there is a conversation to be had about the weight and the movement on that rehydration clause, when will that take place?
I mean, look, it's contracted. So it's not really our position to... We're not raising... You know, the fight is agreed under the same terms as before. You know, as far as we're concerned, the fight goes ahead in September on the date to be decided by the football, and heard nothing else.
Is there any possibilities that that fight wouldn't happen, the rematch with Eubank Jr.?
It's contracted, is all I can say, you know, so that's the fight that both fighters signed up for next. You know, both fighters agreed prior to this there'd be a rematch either way. So I can't really, again, I'd be talking against myself if I said anything different. Conor Benn is ready to go.
Off the back of the Fisher versus Allen rematch, Dave Allen got the victory in emphatic fashion, and now fights are being pitched for him. One of those fights that have been pitched for him is Deontay Wilder. Is there significant interest from Matchroom to make that Wilder fight? Should Wilder come through Herndon?
Yeah, Wilder's got to come through, as you say. He's got to get through that fight. It's mad to think we're even talking about it, really. Let's be honest. Until Dave mentioned it the other day, I'd never even thought about it. But, Dave's put himself in a position to get big fights. He's taken the sport more seriously than he ever has. He's focused on the sport, and I think you're seeing the best of Dave Allen. But I think it's very early days to talk about that fight, in truth.
I want to ask you about the prospective Tio versus Devin Haney fight. That seems, it was on, seems to be off now. Don't know what the situation with it is. What do you know about that prospective fight?
No, not really. We're not involved with either of them, obviously. Would have been a great fight, or could be a great fight if it still happens. You got a lot of big characters in there. You got Tio, you got Devin, you got Tio's dad, you got Bill. It was never going to be easy. If there's one man who can do it, obviously, is Turkey Al Sheikh. But I don't know. I can't give you too much more information. All I know is that there's a lot of characters involved.
Will there be a Matchroom interest on that card?
Possibly, yeah. Possibly working through it now. So let's see.
Ask you about Vasyl Lomachenko, who has since announced his retirement. You feel that maybe a fighter who maybe still had a little bit more to give, but he's hung up the gloves. What do you think about his career?
Tremendous career. Obviously, he's done amazing things. When he came out in the early stage, what did he win a world title after 4 fights? Unbelievable. Special fighter. He'll be missed, of course. And look, but fair play to him because it frees up. He was obviously in that position. The IBF interim had been fought for. Andy Cruz fights in the final eliminator for the number 1 position, so he's going to be mandatory for that world title fight now. Excited about the opportunity for him and new, young, fresh talent coming through.
Appreciate it's not one of your fighters, but Hyman McGear recently tested positive for performance enhancing substances. He's fighting his case and is waiting for the B sample, but this is another occurrence of a fighter testing positive. What do you think about the latest occurrence?
Yeah, look, he's going to go through the process, as all fighters do and should. Again, it's not really my business to talk on it. We all want a clean sport, we all want a safe sport, so let that process play out and go from there.
We got Frank Warren next to you, and there's always been mooted about this next iteration of the 5v5. Have you had any concrete conversations about what that card might look like?
Look, there's 15, 20 fights we can make at all varying different levels, from world championships to English titles. So there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of fights to be made. There's been discussions about it, and I'm sure it will happen. It was a great format the first time round. A lot of people bought into it, and I'm sure they will when we do it again. And like I say, we need our opportunity to get revenge.
Speaking on that Conor Benn fight I asked you previously, Eubank Sr said that, look, he wanted to put a caveat on that fight if Eubank Jr was to return to the ring. He said that, look, if you're going to fight, I'm going to fight as well. He wants to put that bar against it so that he stops Eubank Jr from fighting. Is there actual plausibility that Eubank Sr could return to the ring? Or is that just a threat to stop his son from returning?
Honestly, I don't know. I've never spoken to him about returning to the ring. I don't know. I doubt he'd return to the ring, but anything's possible, isn't it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like a few years back, Nigel Benn was pitched to fight Sakio Bika, wasn't he, in Birmingham? So that didn't happen.
If you're asking me my opinion, does he fight again? I'd say unlikely, but obviously we're in a world of where a lot of things happen in this sport that Mike Tyson fought Jake Paul. So is anything possible? Yes.
With that said, then, with Manny Pacquiao's return, if he somehow gets an unlikely, with respect, victory over Mario Barros, Conor Benn did face off with him a few years back as well. Would that be something you'd be looking at for Benn if Pacquiao wins?
Yeah, look, it'd be hypocritical to say anything about that fight with Manny Pacquiao because I see why they're doing it. I see why it's happening. We're in boxing, these things happen. And Manny Pacquiao is probably one of the biggest names amongst Floyd Mayweather of the sport in recent times. So you can sit there and say it shouldn't be happening, but it is, and that's boxing. And it's the sport we're in, and I can see the reasons why it is happening. And if he wins, he proves everyone wrong, doesn't he? Maybe he looks at Mario Barros and says his last performance on the Jake Paul card wasn't great. I'll have a bit of him. Who knows?
Frank, appreciate it. Thanks for being outside. Good man.